Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Welcome, listeners. It's Stu here, your host of the Thrive Today podcasts. We're excited to launch our crowdfunding campaign to build the Thrive Today app. This app will bring together everything you love: Thrive podcasts, the daily Bible reading guides, teaching video series, and a growing library of meaningful resources designed to deepen your faith journey. To make this vision a reality, we need to raise $30,000. The build won't begin until the full amount is raised, and if we don't reach our target by January 31st, 2026, every donation will be refunded in full. So your support is absolutely vital to get this app off the ground. Simply visit our website thrivetoday.tv and click the app crowdfunding link at the top. You can then select your level of support. We'll keep you updated on progress as we seek to raise the funds needed by the end of January 2026. Now let's jump into this episode of Thrive Deeper with Pastor Matt. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Stu. I'm laughing because of what we're going to try to do today. But I'm also excited, but I'm conscious of the fact that this is probably the most complicated part of the Bible we're ever going to do.
Well, let's tell our listeners what we're doing first of all in Thrive Deeper, because I'm laughing with you, actually. The Thrive Deeper, welcome, listeners. Great to have you with us. And we are going to continue today in the book of Revelation. And as Matt said, I think we're going to be working through the most difficult passage we've had to cover and probably will ever have to cover in Thrive Deeper. Revelation's chapter 12 through to 18. And this is really a very sweeping symbolic drama that unveils cosmic conflict, spiritual resistance, the seductive power of empire. It's apocalyptic literature at its most vivid, really. And for me, as a mere mortal, it is confusing. You're trying to read through this and what am I meant to be taking from this? And I think it'd be great for us, Matt, and for you to bring that clarity to us as we work through this.
It is confusing, Stu, but I mean, the interesting thing is, even as I've dug into the details, and I really have dug into the details of this and looked at different views, and the danger, of course, is this can become very academic, particularly, and it can become two things that I think lead us potentially away from the point. It can become a very academic comparative exercise, right? So here are all the different views.
Who do we think is right?
Yeah. Or it could become very speculative, and this is leaning to because this is talking about future things as well. So you could get lost in speculations as to what actually this is going to look like in the future. And again, that I'm not sure if there's much fruit to be gained from those sorts of speculations. It is interesting. I mean, and it's tempting, particularly because you can see potentially, as I've said in the last episode, how perhaps some of these things could unfold in our day and age.
Yeah.
But I've actually also been quite impacted by these chapters, and I thought, as a way of just starting us off, just a word on what it actually means to understand the meaning. This is true of any biblical text, but I think it's very important, particularly for this, Stu, today, that we not lose sight or that actually we focus on trying to grasp the meaning. So just a word on the meaning of meaning. So that to understand the meaning is to understand what is it? What is this text actually trying to do in its original context?
Yeah.
What is the impact? So this is
and remembering this is a letter.
It's a letter, that's right. It's very explicitly a letter, right?
Correct.
So it's written to churches, and so we need to understand what it meant in order to understand what it means, right? Yeah. So what is the impact? What does this mean for those people, and what is God wanting to do for them? And I think that's a key for what can this text do for us? How do we read this text in a way that ensures that it is going to do what God intended it to do for us, right? Yeah. And I don't think it's just about speculating and or some academic exercise or something like that. So as we come to chapter 12, essentially what this is, I think, doing in its original context is explaining to these people who are undergoing terrible persecution, feeling beleaguered by these, and embattled and hemmed in, and really defeated. They're afraid as well. I mean, confused. They're like, why isn't God blessing this? I mean, there's a sense of they're so embattled. They're feeling like we're losing here, and isn't God in this? And isn't Jesus Lord of? And so what? Why is it unfolding like this? And so, essentially, this is explaining. I mean, the whole of Revelation is written for that. Essentially, to answer those sorts of questions.
And this was written around AD 95, so within 100 years of Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But chapter 12 particularly is an explanation for this. So let's just jump in. And I think this, for me, is what enabled it to have the impact, right? Because it's like, this is what's happening, right? Yes, it's what's going to happen, but it's actually, again, as Richard Borkham in his book on the theology of the book of Revelation points out, Jesus introduces himself as the one who is, who was, and who is to come. And that's a clue, I think, and that's repeated 7 times throughout the book, of course.
Yep.
All the key phrases and even key words are repeated in multiples of 7. This is a very interesting feature of the book of Revelation. So, that's a clue, the one who is, who was, and who is to come, because that's the perspective of these things. This is describing what is, what was, and what is to come. So it's not just one of those things. It's all three, and that's the symbols allow you to transcend the specifics of a particular instantiation of a symbol. So the symbol can have a cyclical sort of fulfillment.
Types of things.
Yeah, it's like the abomination that causes desolation, that Daniel spoke about, that can have a cyclical fulfillment. Babylon becomes a symbol. There's a lot of talk about Babylon here, and this becomes a symbol of sort of world empires, and the beast becomes a symbol of, and so you have symbols that transcend the particularities of history, which allows for multiple fulfillments. But
it is working. It's not an ongoing cyclical thing. It is working to a climax.
It is working to it. That's right. It is working to a climax, right? So, I mean, Paul says it to the Thessalonians that the power of lawlessness, talks about the man of lawlessness who is going to come, right?
Yeah.
But he also says, but the power of lawlessness is already at work in the world, right? So he's saying this is kind of already happening, Jesus indeed said there will be many false Christs and false prophets, but there's going to be an ultimate as well, towards the end. So, and what that means is that there is something for us in this, because what we see in a very polarized sense at the end of the age is actually already happening.
Yes,
and to be ready for the end, the church needs to exercise itself and get, we are the boot camp, the training ground for a sort of wakefulness that responds to, us responding now and learning to respond to the world now prepares us as a church corporately to face, what's coming. So it's explaining, okay, so this is what's happening. This is not just what happens, happening, and it's going to happen, right? And so he sees this sign, and again, this is where we have this rich symbolism now appeared in heaven. It's a woman is clothed in the sun with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 7 stars. Now, all of that is a clue because
12 stars.
12 stars, sorry.
Yep.
What did I say?
7. That's okay.
I've got 7. I got 7 in my mind because there's so many 7s in the book of Revelation. So that's a clue that the woman, broadly speaking, stands for God's people. And this is an important theme throughout the book of Revelation. The church, God's people, is described. And when I say God's people, I'm doing it because there's some discussion around what applies to the church and what applies to Israel.
Yes.
I think we can drive too much of a wedge in there because, of course, essentially, the Gentiles have been grafted into the tree of the people of Abraham. And it's become, and it was always going to become, of course, a universal, people for all tribes and languages. But it's an outgrowth out of Israel, so it's not a replacement.
No.
We don't replace Israel, but it's a growth out of that. So it's inclusive. When I talk about the people of God, it's inclusive of Israel as that original sort of trunk, in a sense.
Yes.
So you get that.
The faithful community, basically.
Yeah. I'm saying that just so that I can not have to get drawn into debates over who does this refer to, just the Jewish people.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about God's people generally because I think this applies to all of us. So the woman, there are lots of comparisons. There's the lamb and the beast, of course, the two lead characters throughout the book of Revelation. There's the two marks, the mark of the lamb and the mark of the beast. We're going to see that. There's also two women. There's the bride of Christ and the whore of Babylon. So you get all of these contrasts. So right here, we're starting to be introduced to the bride of Christ. So the people of God. The sun and the moon, it's again, just remember the dream that Joseph had about his mother and father. It's probably, it's Jacob, of course, being the sort of father of the people of God, the patriarch. So that's a clue. They were the sun and the moon. His mother and father, was pictured there as the sun and the moon. And so that's a clue that this is talking about God's people. So she gives birth to a child. She's giving birth.
Yes.
And then he sees this great red dragon. Of course, this is Satan. This is a symbol of Satan. Yeah. The dragon is a character that we get right throughout Scripture, starting from the serpent in Genesis chapter 1, and here he is, and makes a big sort of starring role. At the end, doesn't end well for him, but that's where the story goes. So he's got 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 diadems. Now, you could try and break that down and work out what is this referring to specifically, but again, 7 is symbolic of completeness, right? So, 7 heads, 10 horns refers back to Daniel's vision of the final,
and there's a lot
kind
of
of Antichrist. Empire. Yeah, that's right. So it's connecting. This is kind of what Daniel was talking about, right? Yeah. It's this final sort of evil empire. We're told that his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to earth. Now, is this referring to the original fall?
Yes.
Potentially, this is and a third of the angels becoming demons. Potentially, that's what's happening there. We're told that he stands before the woman. She's about to give birth, and she bears a child. Now, of course, the child is the Messiah.
Yes.
There's not much
doubt about that.
And he wants to devour the child. Now, we see this in, when Jesus was born, we got Herod, trying to kill Jesus. Pretty much right through Jesus' life, there are forces trying to kill him. Yeah. And of course, in the end, it's through the success of that happens. Again, and this is the, interesting thing about this story is its victory is gained through seeming defeat. And again, remember the importance of that for these people, because they feel like they're getting defeated. And in fact, what God is saying to them, it's actually it's through that experience that we are going to be victorious. So
she gives birth to a son.
So she gives birth to a son. He's actually caught up to God in his throne. This is the resurrection and ascension of Christ.
Yeah. Which we see a little bit reflected in Psalm 2, where the big battle is going on, and it talks about the one who will rule with an iron rod.
That's right. Yeah. And so the woman then flees into the wilderness, and she's nourished there. Think of Elijah. This feels like Elijah escaping from Jezebel and out into the wilderness for 1,260 days, and that's 3.5 years. Now, again, numbers in the book of Revelation, again, very important symbolism to numbers. So half a 7 is like an incomplete, cut short, sort of cut in half.
Right.
Has this idea of being cut in half. Now, again, this discussion around, there's of course, a futurist view that sees this as a literal 3.5 years of the final, sort of a final 7-year tribulation period, and that's possible. We won't get too much into that now.
But that number does appear in Daniel as well, and inferring the same thing. It's an incomplete. It's not as long as it is fullness.
Yeah, that's right.
It's less than fullness.
So whatever it looks like in the future, we. In a literal sense, we know that there's a very important symbolism actually to that half of a 7.
Yeah.
It's cut short, it's cut in half, right? So it's cut off by God. So there's a sense the reign of evil, or what God is going to allow his people to suffer, is going to be cut short. In fact, Jesus even says, if those days had not been cut short. So there's a sense of he's cutting short what is essentially the evil one wants to do.
Yes,
God's cutting it off, right?
Yep.
So kind of cutting it in half. So that's the symbolism around that. So what we then get, that's like the first part of chapter 12 is like the headlines in a sense.
Yes.
And then like in newspaper article style, you get the main stuff, and then it goes back and gives you the details. So from verse 7 of chapter 12, we go back into the detail, and it talks about a war in heaven. So this is the process of the dragon, because we've seen how the dragon
throws the stars, or a third of the stars down to earth.
Casts a third of the stars down to earth. Well, we learn here that this seems to happen in the course of some cosmic battle. The archangel Michael and his angels are fighting against the dragon and being defeated and cast out of heaven, right? So he's cast down, and this is where we're told the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and he's thrown down to earth, and his angels are thrown down with him. So this is the demonic world thrown down to earth. And basically what's going to happen here, because he couldn't defeat the child of the woman, okay? So Jesus is birthed out of God's people, right?
Yes.
God's people give birth to the Messiah. Because he can't kill the Messiah, what he's going to do is pursue God's people. Right? So what is being explained in this context is all of this trouble that you're suffering
is a result of this divine action.
That's right. Is because it's actually because Satan has been hurled down,
and
right? These are like the defeat. Like he knows that he's defeated,
and time's up, basically.
Time's up, or a better way to put that, time has been cut short. His time has been cut in half, right? And so he is, he's angry and he's out to kill you, right? So that's essentially that's the meaning of why we're being told these things, so that we understand that we have a foe,
yes,
that is out to get us, and he's going to do whatever he can to do that. Now we get more detail about what he's going to do to try and get us as we move towards the future in chapter 13. But we're told in chapter 12, verse 13, and when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child, right? So he's pursuing the woman. He couldn't defeat Jesus, so he's going after the people of Jesus.
But she was protected.
But she is protected, and it's interesting that, it says here she was given 2 wings of the great eagle, that she might fly from this serpent into the wilderness to the place she is to be nourished for. So there it is again, for a time, times, and half a time. So the 3.5 years is expressed in a number of different ways. It's expressed in days, times, and half a time, or 3.5 years, or 42 months is the other way that it's put. So again, if we're interpreting scripture from scripture here, there's a lot of allusions to different stories in the Old Testament. So the wings of an eagle, think Isaiah chapter 40, those who hope
in the Lord
will renew their strength. They will rise up on wings like eagles. So that's kind of connected with that idea that he's going to give you the strength. He's going to shield you in a sense. Now, this doesn't mean, Jesus said to his disciples, in this world you will have trouble, right? But he said, but take courage because I've overcome the world.
Yes,
right? So what he's saying to this early church is you are both persecuted and protected. This is an interesting, because they're clearly told, many of you are going to go to your death, right? They're told that beforehand. And yet you're still protected because you're going to rise up on wings like eagles, even through death, right?
Yeah.
Now, we've got to remember that the message here is that, and this is the pattern of Christ, through seeming defeat, we actually gain our victory.
Yeah.
So this is, again, the problem with us is that we think individualistically about individual people, but this is about God's people, God's family is not going to be defeated. You're going to go through these things. Many of you are going to be persecuted and died, but the church is going to, the people of God, the woman, as it were, is going to rise up on wings like eagles, and I'm going to protect. So he's not going to be able to destroy the woman. You understand what's happening here?
Yes.
So he's not going to defeat the church.
Yes.
Right. Even though some of you individually will die, as the famous saying goes, the blood of the martyrs becomes the seed of the church.
Yes.
So this was literally fulfilled and is being fulfilled and will be fulfilled, of course, in the end. Now, whether some of this refers to, a literal, a kind of the rapture of the church through a tribulation, that may be the case too. I sort of want to focus on what this means.
Yeah, no, that's good
for us. That's good for us now.
So of course the dragon's furious because he can't
That's
the
right.
woman. So he still tries to wage war against the rest of her offspring, but he also, in an attempt to kind of get to the woman, he spewed water like a river after the woman to sweep her away in the torrent. But the earth helped the woman. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river that the dragon had spewed from his mouth.
I find this, I mean, the connection with the symbolism of the waters of chaos. You know, it's like the watery chaos stands for like the realm of evil and chaos and even condemnation. And, you know, it's like he's spewing this over them. Because this is more than just physical persecution, I think. I think this is a clue to the fact that I'm going to try and sow chaos over you, right? I'm going to spew. The devil is going to come and he is going to try and drown us in chaos, in temptation. I think this connects with what happens next in chapter 13, because the dominant note in 13 is it's actually not just physical persecution, but deception is a big one here, right? Deception. And so he's going to spew out this chaos, this deception, this whatever it is, condemnation, I think here as well. There's the waters of judgment as well, in a sense. So this could be a sort of refer to condemnation. I love the fact that the earth swallows it up. Yes. And there's a sense of, it's like the reverse of the judgment on Korah and those that rebelled in Numbers chapter 14, you know.
Okay.
Because
where the earth swallowed them.
Yeah, swallowed them. But in this case, and I think this is the, like this redemptive thing about the grave and Jesus going into the grave, like the grave opens up and swallows all of this. Because of course, all of these things have been essentially defeated in the grave by Jesus. So I'd love that symbolism there. So yes, he becomes furious. He's going off to make war against the rest of our offspring, which is what's happening. I mean, this is again still happening, right? So, and by the way, the offspring are basically defined in terms of those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, right? If you don't do those things, he'll leave you alone.
Yes.
But if you do those things, look out. He's coming after you and he's going to spew chaos over you in any way he can. Right. Yeah. So get ready. So we finish here and he's standing. So the dragon is standing on the sand of the sea. Right. And this is where Stu, it gets interesting. If it wasn't interesting already, it really gets interesting. So he sees a beast coming out of the sea. Now, this is important because remember the symbolism of the sea stands for a world in chaos. Right? The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves, but God is mightier than the breakers of the sea. Now, we've seen previously seen an angel with 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on the land, right? God's sovereignty over both. And we're going to see that in a lot of what we're going to read, God is allowing this sort of stuff to happen. So I just want to state that at the start. This is all being allowed, permitted.
Yeah. This isn't taking God by surprise. No. He's allowing this. This is part of, he's using this as part of his plan.
That's right.
In a sense.
So out of the chaotic, the chaotic world system basically gives birth to this
beast.
Beast. And remember beasts in the book of Daniel and are a symbol of like an evil empire.
Yeah.
So what we're going to get, though, here is a kind of copy of something that looks, because remember, Jesus predicted false Christ and false messiahs, essentially, right? And we're going to get an evil trinity, so a sort of a fake trinity in a sense. We're going to have the dragon, the beast from the sea, the beast from the earth, and the beast from the sea. And they're going to form a kind of false trinity. And they're going to mimic, in many different ways, they're going to mimic the true God. In fact, they're going to attempt to do what they do through mimicry, through deception.
Yes.
By trying, and this is really important for us, I think, as Christians. Who is he after? He's after those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because I think as Christians, we think, he's going to deceive all of those people out there. No, he's going to try to deceive you, right? That's the one who is, you're the one who he particularly wants to. Those people, he's already got them, right?
Yeah.
He's actually after you, right? So this is all designed, and this is important, to deceive us. As Jesus says, to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. So he this beast coming out of the sea, he has 10 horns, 7 heads. We've seen that before.
Yep.
And he looks like a leopard. His feet are like a bear. Mouth is like a lion. So this is a composite sort of creature. Like Daniel's different creatures, but a sort of composite of all of those creatures that Daniel describes in his vision. Now, Daniel sees nations exemplified by different creatures. This is all of those and the sort of the worst of all of that in a sense. So this is basically the ultimate beast.
Worldly empires.
Yeah, the sort of consummation of worldly rebellion, Tower of Babel sort of stuff that's going on here, right? Also the fact that there's a sense in which, because again, everything was created according to its kind in Genesis chapter 1. So crossing over kinds is always a symbol of evil throughout Scripture.
Right.
And so the mixing of kinds here is a symbol of the fact that this is particularly evil. So the dragon gives power to this evil empire, to this beast. Now it says in verse 3, one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast.
Yeah.
Again, this is mimicking Jesus' death and resurrection. So he's going to sort of mimic that so that people, they marvel at him and they follow him, right?
Yes.
Now remember, it's written to us. He's going to do things that look like Jesus so that we follow him.
Yep.
Or we follow this system.
This pattern. Yep.
And in fact, to the point where, as it says in verse 4, and they worshipped the dragon, for he'd given authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who can fight against it?
So this is really the beast from the sea, because we're going to hear about the beast from the earth soon. The beast from the sea really is speaking to political power, to empire, really
that's
is
right.
what that's speaking to.
Yeah.
Rising up and using its power to control. Yep.
Yeah, so the people of God, because I know some people think this in the future, this is just God dealing with Israel.
The Jewish people, yep.
And again, let's speak generally of God's people, because again, this stuff happens. The goal here is to create a political power that looks like it's on our side, that looks like it's one of us. Okay. Great idea. So he's given, and this is where you have these, there are 3 expressions here from verse 5. And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty, like this is God allowing this to happen. Verse 7, and it was allowed to make war on the saints, and authority was given to it over every people, tribe, and nation. So God is allowing this, to happen. The sovereignty of God is at work here, but he's allowing it for 42 months. So that's important. So God is giving, he's allowing, but it's cut short. Okay.
Verse 8, all those on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name was not written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slaughtered.
All right, so there's a topic for a whole theological discussion. Anyway, so the true people of God don't worship the beast, is the point there. Right, so now we see another beast.
The beast from the earth.
I saw another beast rising out of the earth. Now, it's interesting. One from the sea, one from the earth. What does this mean? I mean, some have suggested that because the sea is connected with the realm of evil, and the earth or the land seems to be associated with God's people. Does this mean that he comes? And there's some indication from Paul that because there's a sense that the Antichrist sets himself up within. Well, sets himself up in the temple. Does that mean that within the church is he, and certainly in the late Middle Ages, reforming, people involved in the Reformation felt like, again, because this happens, these corrupt popes were Antichrist. And man, when you read the history, you can see why they thought that, right?
Yeah.
Because they're setting themselves up in the temple of God, But the point is that this is a religious figure. So whereas the first beast is a
empire.
Yep, is an empire. The second beast is a kind of religious figure or system. And it has all the authority of the first beast. It performs great signs, right? Makes fire come down from heaven, right? Like,
well, he had 2 horns like a lamb, which is pretty important. Because
very important,
the mimicry here that you were talking about before.
That's right.
To Jesus.
That's right. So, that's an important hint that he's going to look as much like Jesus as possible, and he's going to do great wonders. Now, Jesus, in Matthew chapter 24, that, that these antichrists, these false prophets, are going to try and deceive even God's elect, if possible, by great signs and wonders, right? So you want to be very careful about just chasing after the big miracles, right? Because that actually is going to be what this guy is going to be doing. And the point is, he's a deceiver, right? You get this repeated, and by verse 14, by the signs that it is allowed. Here it is against you.
Yeah,
he is allowed to exercise these powers, and by use of these powers, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast. I mean, that's an interesting one, because again, there's mimicry. He's mimicking God because God creates us in His image.
Right.
An image is made for the beast.
Yeah. And then he was
wounded with the sword and yet lived, right? There's death and resurrection. I mean, there's all of this mimicry going on here. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast. Again, it's a mimicry of the creation. God created man in His image and breathed into him so that the image might even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And then we come to verse 16. It causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, and both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. Now, marking on the forehead in Ezekiel chapter 8 and 9, Ezekiel has this vision of judgment coming upon Jerusalem, and there's a man dressed in linen with a writing kit, and God commands the man with the writing kit to go throughout this city and to mark the foreheads, to put a mark on the foreheads of all of those who grieve, mourn and wail over the state of the evil city,
right.
In that case, Jerusalem, and they are saved. So the marking, and in a number of different ways, this idea of marking, like the high priest has the name of God upon him.
The Passover, even, if you get right to
yes, marking the houses. So the idea of marking or sealing, I mean, the seal of the Holy Spirit, of God's people being marked is really important. And we've already heard that the 144,000 have been sealed. They've been marked, right? The mark of Jesus.
So this is again trying to mimic.
This is mimicking
God's way,
right?
To deceive God's people.
Yeah. So it's actually, He's marking them in a way that makes them think that they're receiving the right mark, but it's actually the wrong mark because they've been deceived.
This is consistent with how God does things, so this must be fine.
So it's obviously not some really obvious thing here, because it's a mimicry of that other mark, right? Because we all want to be marked and sealed, sealed with the Holy Spirit. He wants to inhabit us.
Yes.
He wants to possess us. So is He offering something here that is a mimic of the seal, the mark of the Holy Spirit? He's offering something instead of that.
Yes.
Oh, I think that's something to be wary of, this kind of deception, because I think we can tend to think this is something really obvious, but it's a subtle copy of the real thing, right? So what does it say? Causes both free and slave to be marked on the right hand of the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, in that context, of course, even to participate, one of the problems in the first century, and particularly the late first century, was that you would often get shut out of trade guilds if you didn't sacrifice to the god of those trade guilds.
Right.
And so essentially you were shut out of the market. And so these people are experiencing this kind of thing. So essentially the writer is saying, this thing that's happening to you, I want to keep coming back to that. This is part of this whole, this, because you're not receiving the mark of the beast, and therefore you're shut out of the market in this sense. This is what's happening. And by the way, it's going to happen ultimately in the future. I think there'll be an ultimate expression, of course, in the future of this. Again, we can speculate, is this a chip?
Over the years, I think once
things.
It was credit cards, and then it was, who knows?
I know. And I feel like a lot of the explanations are just too obvious, that this is the issue that I have with that. So we're like, I'm obviously not going to get that. But remember, this is going to be deceptive.
Yeah.
But it is, it's interesting that it's connected with buying and selling, and in a consumer, in a consumer world that we live in, that's obsessed with markets and economics, and again, something we're meant to be involved in those sorts of things. We talked in our sister podcast, Thrive Perspectives, about how to be involved without being entangled, of course, because we have to be involved in these things without getting entangled. So this is going to try and muddy that, to draw involvement into entanglement. So whatever that means.
Yeah. I think for many people reading this right now, they're going to start worrying about, if it's that deceptive, how am I going to know? And I think there's been a lot of people find fear in this, because they're uncertain about whether they're, I've had conversations in the last couple of weeks as we've been going through the book of Revelation with people who are kind of like, well, how do I know I'm doing everything right and that I should be? And if it's that deceptive, how do I know I haven't already been deceived? And all these sorts of things. So it's going to be a matter of us walking closely with God, isn't it, really, and knowing His word.
Yeah, as it says in Revelation, I mean, the people of the Lamb are marked by the fact that they follow the Lamb wherever He goes, right? So this is about focusing on Jesus. I mean, this is so important. Focus on Jesus. Do not look for your saviors in political figures the latest fads or the latest guy doing signs and wonders. And don't get drawn into, the YouTube algorithms that lead you into, radicalize you in this direction or that direction, or focus on the mission, on Jesus and the mission of Jesus.
And live your life as Jesus would have us live our lives, not what anyone else is telling you, regardless of how much they look like they're on our team.
Yeah, that's right. So verse 18, this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, as I've surveyed the literature on this, there's a whole lot of different theories about what this, could be. In the 1800s, some New Testament scholars worked out that this could be following the fairly common ancient practice of gematria, which is assigning numbers to letters, right? So names would have numbers, and that is, I think, that is going on. Probably is going on behind this. They worked out that this could say Nero Caesar. There's a little bit of a stretch to get there, but is this saying it's going to be that kind of thing? Is this a veiled way of referring to the Roman Empire or maybe other? And there's various theories, to that effect.
I read one also that talked about the 666 being the triple counterfeit Trinity.
Yeah.
As opposed to 777 being the complete.
Yeah, I think that those sorts of things, those slightly higher level interpretations are probably more on the right track. Now, maybe there's something very literal here that we'll know when we get there. Like maybe that may be that sort of thing.
I guess though it does say, here is wisdom. The one who has understanding must, in my translation, must calculate the number of the beast, because it is the number of a man. His number is. So it feels like there's an imperative. You need to figure this out.
Yeah, like it's a sort of riddle. Yeah. The thing is, no one's really.
No.
It's like in all of the history of interpretation, there's no generally agreed sort of interpretation of this.
And maybe it'll be, when we're in it, we'll see it and recognize it for what it is.
Yeah, I think that's more likely to be the case. However, the fact is, and this is the beauty of these symbols, is that while they can have very while they may have very literal fulfillments, there's also a symbolism, and certainly to the 666, it's not 777. And as you say, it's like a false trinity of falling short. And of course, the very definition of sin is falling short of God's standard.
Yes.
So 666 falls short of 777. And it's interesting, as we go into chapter 14, we read that in contrast to this, so straight away there's a contrast form. It's important not to stop reading there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think we know that bit, and we forget what's after.
Yes.
Because he says, then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him the 144,000 standing again for God's people, who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Now, Jesus is, the number of Jesus' name using this practice of gematria is 888.
Oh, wow.
Important because, again, the resurrection of Jesus starts the creation all over again. So there's a sort of, significance in that, in the sense that, he rose on the first or the day of the week, or the eighth day. Yes. So in a sense, he is the beginning of a new creation. So there's, here is the true mark as opposed to the false mark. And so it moves on to that, and again, it's victory. They're singing a song before the throne, right? They're singing this new song. And it says in verse 4, describing God's people, is just, again, this is a statement that might confuse some people. It says, it is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Now, what does the first statement mean? On one level, remember that this, in some sense, this could be a reference to the fact that before certain battles, soldiers had to consecrate themselves like priests.
Right.
Okay, so they had to not have any sexual activity before. It was a way of symbolically setting yourself apart for a sort of sacred battle that you're fighting on God's behalf in a sort of priestly role. So it could be reference to that. But more likely, I think that's referring to the fact that God's people are always described as a virgin daughter. And this gets back to the contrast between the bride of Christ and the whore of Babylon. I think this is an allusion to that difference.
I feel that too, and because if we look at the other prophetic literature in the Old Testament, Ezekiel, often when God's people go astray, they're prostituting themselves in a sense.
That's the way that the prophets exhibit it. And in fact, in the first century, cultic activity often involved cultic prostitution as well. So I think that's probably mixed in there as well.
So basically it's saying they've understood and kept themselves away from the beast, the empire beast.
That's right. That's right. And so he sees this vision, from verse 6 of Revelation 14, this angel with the eternal gospel, going out to all people, right? And then this other angel declaring the destruction of Babylon, fallen is Babylon the Great, right?
Yeah.
This is because remember, we're moving towards the final outpouring of God's judgment here. We're moving towards the 7 bowls. This is what we're about to get to here. So he's declaring this up front. It's the end is coming, and also judgment upon the beast.
Yes,
and also those who worship the beast.
So there was a third angel, followed them and spoke with a loud voice. If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, which is mixed full strength in the cup of his anger.
This is a warning here. Don't put in your lot, because remember the pressure that was on the early church, right? To comply, to compromise with the world. The whole of the book of Revelation is essentially a message to churches who are in a lot of danger of compromising with the world, sort of for convenience sake, because of the pressure. And this is a warning saying, don't throw in whatever you have to suffer, right, to stay away.
It's worth it.
From assimilating, like that, it's worth it, right? Yeah. So this is a pretty stern warning that we're given. And verse 12 says, "Here is a call for the endurance of the saints." So we get these indications of what the meaning is, to come back to that, Stu. This is why all of this is written, to encourage us to endure whatever we have to endure without compromising and being drawn into the world system, which, remember, as we've said before, is either doing the wrong thing or trying to achieve the right goal with the wrong kinds of powers, right? So,
and just on that, I think really pertinent that we happen to be here in Revelation in our sister podcast, Thrive Perspectives. We just did an episode talking, as you said before, specifically about how do we not get entangled, but we've still got to be in the world. We're just not of it.
Yeah, that's right. So it moves then to a picture of the harvest of the whole earth. And there are 2 harvests here. It's like a wheat harvest and a grape harvest. And there's some debate around, is this a harvest of the righteous and the wicked? Like as in God's people and those who are not God's people. Yeah. So, the harvest of the wheat is the harvest of God's people, and then the grapes, because what happens, the grapes get harvested and then thrown and trampled
in the press.
And it's a picture of judgment. Now, some people think both are harvests of judgment. It's the same thing described in 2 different ways. And there are reasons for that we won't get into. I quite like the picture of, the harvest of God's people being harvested, and then the judgment and then the judgment. Anyway, it's kind of split on that. But the point is that we're moving towards the final stage. And Jesus talked about a harvest, didn't he, in Matthew chapter 13?
He did, yeah.
he said, don't try and pull up the weeds now, right? This is the thing, because again, this is what I mean by trying to get to the right goal in the wrong way. We're not the moral police of the world. We're not going around weeding, we've got to be salt and light in the world and shine in the darkness and all that sort of stuff. Judgment isn't now, right? We're not pulling up weeds. Yeah. So he said, wait to the end of the age and then God will do the weeding. God will harvest the field and separate the wheat from the weeds, and that's what's happening here at the end of chapter 14. So now we get the introduction to the 7 plagues. So he sees 7 angels with 7 plagues. Now think plagues, we're thinking Egypt again. Yep. So the Exodus becomes an important image, sort of prefiguration of the final judgment. So the world system is being cast as Egypt, and God is sending his judgment on the world to deliver his people out of it. So the Exodus picture is being used to describe what's going to happen at the end of the age. Yeah. So here, Stu, here we are at the end of the age. Yes. Now, this is now very much talking about the future. Yeah. Because it says, for with them, the wrath of God is finished, as in the full justice of God is being poured out on the earth. I mean, and this we have in verse 5, this image of the sanctuary. Out of the sanctuary comes these 7 angels with 7 plagues. This idea of them coming out of God's heavenly sanctuary means that this is the fulfillment, right? Because in the Ark of the Covenant was in the sanctuary. The sanctuary stands for God's purpose. So God is going to be faithful. In other words, the picture there is coming out of God's sanctuary from where the Ark of the Covenant sits. And this is God's faithfulness at work here, bringing final justice in answer to of course, to the prayers of those in the fifth seal. Yes. Crying out, how long, O Lord, how long till you judge the inhabitants of the earth? They were told to wait a little longer. Well, now they're not waiting any longer. Yeah. This is it happening.
There's no more pauses,
right.
That's for sure.
So chapter 16, we have the bowls being poured out, right? And in summary, these are just like the plagues on Egypt again. So the picture that's being used here is that of the Exodus. It's interesting, in the first bowl that's poured out, we have people being marked. Again, it's a play on this because they're marked with painful sores, right? And it even says, to highlight the sort of perhaps the irony, the tragic irony of this, that these sores come upon the people who bore the mark of the beast, right? So it's sort of casting the mark of the beast as like an infection or something. In a sense. It's being answered in that way. So then we have a bowl being poured out in the sea. Sea turns to blood. The bowl poured out in the rivers become like blood. Again, this is evoking the Exodus context. Yeah. There's a song of celebration, interestingly, Stu, in heaven. And what are they celebrating? They're celebrating the justice
of God.
Right? The justice of God. The 4th angel pours out his bowl. The sun scorches the earth. They were scorched by the fierce heat. I mean, one way of, in the scriptures of sort of symbol of God protecting his people is like Psalm 121, the sun shall not harm you by day. This sense of being scorched by the heat of the sun is a sort of symbol of judgment or being protected from judgment. So the 5th angel pours out his bowl on the throne of the beast, right? And its kingdom was plunged into darkness. Again, it's evoking the Egyptian Exodus context. Darkness again, the deception connected with deception. It's interesting at each point, Stu.
And yet they did not repent. Yeah.
It says, yet they did not repent. In fact, it says a couple of things. It says in both the 4th bowl and the 5th bowl, it says they cursed the name of God, and they did not repent. So the idea here is, in a sense, is just like the hardness of Pharaoh's heart being brought to the surface, being compounded, as it were, through these things. And this is what we see here. They curse the God of heaven. And in fact, it says it 3 times at the 7th bowl. It says it as well that they cursed God. So the 6th bowl, we come back to this picture of the Euphrates.
Yes.
Remember? Yep. We've had this before. The angels who stand at the river Euphrates, which is the traditional boundary of the Promised Land to the north, but there's also, it was the northern boundary of the Roman Empire, and there was a lot of fear associated with the Parthians coming down and invading. So all of these images are sort of clustered together to kind of picture this looming threat, right? God has been holding back something, and now he's going to let it
go.
Let it all cave in.
Yeah.
And actually it says here, coming out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits, right? So the spirit of the dragon and the 2 beasts, again, the false trinity, there's a false trinity here.
Yes.
These unclean spirits go out, demonic spirits go out performing signs to assemble
the kings,
all the kings of the earth
world.
For a great battle, a great final attempt. This is like the final death throw, the final attempt to finally destroy the people of God. And they gather at this place called Armageddon. And Armageddon is literally is the mountain of Megiddo. Megiddo was a very strategically placed fortress in northern Israel. It's actually not a mountain, interestingly. It's on a plain. It's a mound. It's quite a high mound but it's in a plain. And so this is a bit of a composite sort of picture here, which is why this is probably symbolic, because a lot of decisive battles for the land were fought in that Valley of Jezreel, as it's known. Some people think that there's something literal is going to happen here, but I think there are hints here that this is probably, look, at the very least, it's symbolic.
Yes.
So anyway, this is this final showdown, and then we have the 7th bowl poured out.
Well, Jesus speaks there, doesn't he? Or God speaks there.
Yeah.
Look, I'm coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who is alert and remains close, so that he may not go naked and they see his shame.
Yeah. And again, notice how the meaning comes out in that, because what is the imperative of Revelation? Stay awake.
Yes.
Right? This is the key thing here. Stay awake, stay awake. Don't get lured into this. Yeah. And the picture there is of, a town like an encampment being attacked, and the soldiers aren't dressed, they haven't got their armor on, they're just going to
run out naked,
run around naked, right? Yeah. So make sure, again, the armor of God in Ephesians chapter 6,
yes,
right? Keep yourself armored, well armored, right? And then we have the 7th bowl, and it's done, right? This is where there's this declaration, it's done, it's finished, and we have all of these signs of upheaval, right? Lightning, thunder, earthquakes. The city is split, and it says God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of wine of the fury of his wrath. Every island fled away. No mountains were to be found, and great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven. Yeah. This is, again, standard ways, God raining down judgment, and the hailstones are associated with this idea of being stoned, in a sense, like a sign of the curse.
Okay.
This is the curse coming down, right? Upon humankind.
But where have we heard...
they curse God,
yes,
that says at the end.
But where have we heard it is done before?
Well, on the cross.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in chapter 17, Stu, we have the beginning of the most explicit sort of beginning of this comparison between the woman, we've met the woman as the bride of Christ, and this other character now that we get, which is the great whore of Babylon who rides upon the beast. She's kind of riding on the dragon. The dragon and his forces are going to turn against her. This is all going to implode.
Yes.
At the end of this.
They all turn on each other.
Evil destroys evil.
That's right.
So we have this picture of essentially the world system. God's people are described as the bride of Christ. The world system is described as the whore of Babylon. And it has so many associations with past prophecy, which is, depicts the nations as kind of luring God's people into sin, as a prostitute will lure someone into evil. And this is, being used here as a way of describing a system that lures us in. And again, just remember the meaning here is you've just got to watch out, because this has lure. It's not going to be some obvious thing that you do all your academic work and, you work out what the mark is and you can just coolly decide between. No, we are right now, we are feeling the lure of this, right? So this is where this is important. So be awake. You are going to be tempted by it, right? So make sure you're awake enough that you can identify, hang on, I'm being lured here into an entanglement, becoming one flesh, as it were, with the world system. So be very, very careful with that.
That's good.
So that's why that's described here. So she's, because on her forehead, there it is again, is written the name of Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of the earth's abominations, right? And, she's drunk on the blood of the saints. So this is, again, the persecution here. So it gets a little complicated here, Stu, because he sees, again, the beast. So, John is marveling at all of this, and the angel says, why do you marvel? And this is actually unusual because the angel does some interpreting here, which we haven't had.
The
before.
meaning, exactly.
Maybe it could have been useful before, but anyway. So he says, the beast that you saw is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit. So again, this is mimicry here. But, defeated, I think part of what that is saying is the one who has been defeated by Christ is going to be given an opportunity to have a last kind of lease of life to do his worst, essentially. Probably that's what's going on there. So this calls for a mind with wisdom, we're told. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. What on earth is going on there? Well, again, don't really know. There's lots of discussion around this. There's lots of discussion around original context and emperors, various emperors, sequences of emperors. Is this a clue to that? I think whatever the different views, most will agree. This is these are sort of kingdoms, the
cyclical rise.
The 7 there indicates that this is the fullness of sort of worldly power. And the 7 mountains, Rome, of course, was built on 7 hills. There are coins during this period, actually, that were minted that have a woman depicted as Roma, the goddess Roma, sitting on 7 hills. But we're told these are 7 mountains, so this could be connecting Rome with a kind of power and essentially abstracting that as a symbol of 7 worldly kingdoms. So it's like the 7-fold worldly kingdom. Is this like a way of describing the world system?
The oppressive empires of the world.
And of course we have the 7 kings. There's actually an 8th here who is sort of connected. It says, verse 11, as for the beast, that was not, is not, and isn't, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, right? So that's probably it's like the same one come back again, essentially. This is this death and resurrection theme.
The mimicry.
Anyway, let's not get too drawn into the details here. Anyway, the point is the final system is given authority for an hour, it says in verse 12. They are to receive authority as kings. These sort of 10 kings in this final period, whatever that's referring to, receive authority for an hour. Right, they're going to have. They're given a brief moment to do their worst. These are of one mind.
They make war against the Lamb.
Yeah, but ultimately they hand their power over their power and authority to the beast. So basically, they've sold their soul to the devil. In other words, these 10 kings, and they're in cahoots with him. Eventually, this is turning on itself. Because it says, and the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked. And devour her. This is evil devouring itself, essentially. Right. So, meanwhile, Stu, okay, all of that complexity is happening, right, in the world system on Earth, and then we finish, and this is a great place to finish because we finish with this song, right, in the heavens. This mighty voice, this angel comes down from heaven declaring, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and so forth, right? But now this is final judgment is coming. He hears a voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins. There against you is the meaning, right? This is what this is all about. Come out of her, my people. Not don't be involved with the world, because we're meant to be lights in the darkness, but be holy, right? This is another way of saying you're going to be in the world, but you are as salt and light in in the world, and that means being holy, a holy people.
Right.
So judgment is declared. We have, from verse 9, there are three groups of people whose this is like a lament or a funeral dirge is described here, Stu. And the funeral dirge is in three-part harmony from verse 9. The kings of the earth, they weep and wail, right, over the fall. The merchants, those who made money from this, they weep and wail, right? And we have their song, right? And then the shipmasters, again, those involved in and this is a big deal in the ancient, as in fact it is today, the traders, right? They also are joining in this three-part harmony funeral dirge, because the world system that they loved, that they benefited from, that they ruled over, it's all, their whole kingdom is falling down around them. But verse 20, rejoice over her, O heaven, right? And you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her, right? And so there's a mighty angel takes up this, a stone like a great millstone, throws it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard no more, and a craftsman of it. This is the end, the climax of this declaration of judgment over Babylon. And this leads us, Stu, into the final moment, the final chapters 19 to 22, which we're going to cover in the next episode. But let's, again, through all of these complexities, I come back once again, Stu, to the key imperative here is to stay awake. In a sense, I often say life with God is actually beautifully simple, in a sense. We live for His purpose. We stick to His plans and His way of doing things. It's about keeping in step with God. And this is an everyday thing. It says of God's people here, they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. We are called to follow Jesus, and following Jesus, whatever costs you, is the safest place in the universe.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Our home on the internet is thrivetoday.tv. You can contact us, ask questions, see all our resources and much more at our website thrivetoday.tv. We really appreciate the questions and thoughts about what you're reading as we go through the Bible with Thrive. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper and thrive.